every business they have strengths, they have challenges, right? But every business, that is successful or at one time was successful, they have that reason for being. They have a solution that is catering to a consumer need. So at first I have to get my arms around that. What is that proposition? And then what are the key levers that can be pulled so that ultimately the business can optimize its performance? So whether it's, their vendor community and they can leverage the vendor base, whether it's the strength of the brand, whether it's the price value equation of the products.
Welcome to the Ecommerce Toolbox Expert Perspectives, a podcast by Noibu, where we explore the elite strategies and cutting-edge insights with our expert guests. Get ready to propel your e-commerce business to the next level.
Welcome to another episode of the Ecommerce Toolbox. Joining us today, we have Robin Helfer, and this is actually going to be our first episode that we've ever done before with someone who is a CFO, but Robin's not just the CFO, she's also a COO in retail. So we are very lucky to have Robin today. Welcome, Robin.
Thank you, Kailin. Thanks for having me.
And Robin and I actually know each other from her time at Ashley Stewart, but she's been at other different brands that you might recognize like Casper and Swell, and has very, very interesting, but diverse and very cool background. But maybe it's better if you hear it from her than from me. So maybe we kick it off by asking Robin a bit about your background. Maybe talk to us about how you ended up in kind of finance, retail, operations. Love to hear a bit more about your background.
So I started my career in public accounting, actually. I was an accounting major undergrad, but I focused on consumer products and services. I've always loved consumer and working on businesses that have strong brands. That's just something I think that is a differentiator in the marketplace. I started after public. I was working for very large consumer products companies like Unilever, like Cadbury, and made my way into middle market and ultimately private equity backed companies, primarily with the Tops company. I joined Tops in finance, but then because I was getting so involved in the operations of the business, I expanded into operations and took on this dual role of finance and ops, and coupled that with strategy, got my MBA in management, which really is like getting a degree in strategy. And, having had been at Tops, that was one of the best decisions I ever made going into the middle market. And that is where I have stayed. And then from Tops, went to a variety of the other companies that you mentioned. And again, love consumer products, love businesses with strong brands. And in more recent years, some of those businesses had, direct to consumer and omni-channel presences.
Love it. How do you think your financial background, you mentioned you started off in accounting, has influenced your approach to operations?
So finance gives you an excellent foundation. You learn how a business works, and ultimately all of the activities of the company end up translating themselves into numbers. And when you are in operations, it's really important to look at different processes. And so you could see how when you're in finance, you learn how to do process mapping. So that feeds itself and lends itself to operations. And then in terms of strategic planning, all strat plans, they go out, let's say it's 1, 3, 5, 10 years, but there are always numbers that are framed around a strategy. So you can see what that linkage is. And it's just something, that is a natural fit.
Makes sense. And having worked in different industries, right? Like you mentioned, clothing, mattress, you mentioned Cadbury, right? What are some of the key lessons that you've learned across these different industries specific to retail?
Sure. So every consumer facing business, they have what is their, goes back to some of the basics. What is their unique selling proposition? What is their reason for being? And what is the consumer need that the business is fulfilling, and hopefully doing so in a way that is better than their competitive set. It all comes down to, fulfilling a need for the consumer and focusing on the consumer. And without that, the business cannot exist, thrive and survive ultimately.
Looking across the different industries and obviously the different time periods as well, I'm assuming when you first started off your career and you're in the Unilevers of the world, e-com was probably much smaller than it is now. And everyone's talking a lot more about omni-channel. What are some of the specific changes you've seen in the last decade when it comes to e-commerce and how actually either private equity backers or just multinationals are looking at e-com?
It sounds very basic, but years ago when I was in some of these consumer businesses, we did not necessarily have a direct to consumer store. We did not have that present. And I think in today's day and age, even if a business started out in wholesale, you absolutely have to have your direct relationship with your consumer. And you need to do that either with DTC, physical doors. You need to have that. I will say though, and I'm sure you can appreciate that in more recent years, it has become harder to play, harder to win, and more expensive. It's more challenging to develop that relationship. And the consumer expects you personalization. That's what they want. And you have to give the consumer what they want. So I think that is more challenging. And with some of the more recent, changes with like Google Analytics and things that are out there that, it's making it more difficult. But the businesses that win are the ones that are going to be able to create, cultivate, and retain, the relationship with their customer base.
How big of a role do you think technology plays in this? Or do you think it's more of a branding exercise? Do you know what I mean? Like, could you have the best product in the world and kind of crappy tech, but people still come because they have the product need? Or do you think the tech is what really kind of helps guide the products off the shelves? Super curious your opinion on that, Robin.
It's definitely a bit of both. I mean, to me, again, a brand and the relationship that brand can cultivate with a consumer, that gives you, insulation. And I think that it's absolutely critical to succeed. That being said, and having come from, I'm in an enablement set of functions, being in finance and ops. One of the key legs, I say, people, process, and systems. Okay. And it's been that way for 20 plus years. Systems and technology are critical, and you cannot give your customer friction and a negative experience in the journey of that customer. So it's a key enabler, and you've got to figure out how to do it, but you have to do it in a way that's right-sized for a company. And when I say right-sized, I mean it has to work with the business model and be affordable, for that organization. But it is, very critical, and businesses have to pay attention to their tech stack, and the journey that they're taking their customers on.
Having been a CFO, COO, I'm assuming you've been on the receiving end of a lot of pitches internally for technology.
Yes.
Obviously you have to take care of cash flow as well, and understand the cash flow of the business, and make sure that retailers are famously known for struggling with a lot of cash cycles. So maybe talk to us a bit about retail cash flow. How important is it for retailers, and what are some of the methods that you use more tactically to make sure that you're able to strike the right balance of investment, but also not lever the business into a situation where they might get into trouble?
Sure. So, and this is like a core principle that, again, I've been saying for a very long time. The more that you can enable your business with a tech stack that is like off the shelf and has as many connectors as possible, that will optimize the total cost of ownership for the company, the better. Because if you have too many disparate, there's so many solutions out there, to your point, Kailin, but you need to have, you can't have so many that you're creating all of these interfaces, because ultimately things are going to break along the way. So I think that is, to your point, that is a way. If you extend yourself too far, if you have too many technological solutions, you're ultimately going to reduce the experience for your customer, and it's not going to be optimized the way you really want it to be. You want to have, fewer, quicker, faster, technology solutions. And beyond technology, like you talk about metrics and what makes a retailer / e-tailer successful. And, along the way, I think there are a variety of KPIs and metrics that can be used to measure, is my business on track? Are we off track? But then dissecting into the metric, what's driving it, and then what are ways that we can make things better. We know our customers today, our consumers, they want the products at a great price, when they want it, where they want it. All of those things are really important in order to be successful. But you do have to balance that with affordability, with what's the right amount of inventory to have, as an example, what's the right assortment to have, all of those things. But it's to me, building the brand, developing the relationship with the, consumer, but also focusing on, optimizing costs, but doing it in a way that hopefully is imperceptible to your consumer. So that was like a long answer, but hopefully that gives you a flavor.
No, it's good. And getting a bit more kind of specific on it. Let's say that we have a lot of VPs of e-com that listen to this podcast. So let's say you're a VP, you have to go chat with the CFO or the COO to get budget approval.
Yeah.
We're in 2024. As we know, interest rates are still high. Who knows what the Fed's going to do? So curious, in your opinion, like what are some of the metrics that stood out most to you when you're evaluating projects and understanding, like, is it like payback in year? Like, how are you looking at these things?
Sure.
Out of curiosity.
It depends on what, first of all, like taking a big step back, what are the financial objectives of your ownership? So that's first. You have to get alignment on that. And typically, again, the heads of e-com, they're part of that process. So it should be very transparent in terms of what the overriding objectives are. That being said, you are correct. I mean, of course, I'm going to look at the return on investment, the payback, but it depends on what the initiative is. Certain initiatives, I'm looking for a shorter payback because they're more tactical in nature. If they are more strategic in nature, let's say they are, you're actually making inroads and you're getting into a new channel, as an example of distribution. In my experience, the ownership group is going to be more, patient, if you will, on a payback period for something that is like a major leg of the stool or foothold for the company versus something that is more tactical, where we may be looking at things like, ROAS, which is, obviously important, but you can have a really high ROAS and you don't have a lot of sales. So that doesn't work either. So it's really it's a combination of things that it's important for heads of e-com to partner with, someone like me sitting in the finance and ops chair to ultimately come out with the best solution. I talked earlier about assortment. It's great to have a wide assortment. You need to have that for your consumers, but the more SKUs that you have, the higher your inventory is going to be. And that's cash that you're tying up in the inventory that you don't necessarily have to spend behind marketing. Which of course, heads of e-com, they need marketing in order to be successful and to reach their customer base. So it's like there's no one size fits all, but it kind of taking a step back. What's the strategy? What does the ownership group want? I will tell you something also that's very important. It's less directly about near-term numbers, but it's about the customer file. Are you growing the customer file? Are you favorably influencing retention? These are the metrics. These are the things that matter when you're in a direct-to-consumer business.
Yeah. So when you looked at some of these projects and doing your annual budgets and reforecasting mid-year, when you went to go make your actual tactical recommendations, what are your kind of top 5 KPIs that you would always look at? And you mentioned some of them already, but I'm curious, like obviously ROAS is one, but I'm curious when you go and you operationally look at these things, what are kind of some of the top 5 KPIs that you use to make your decisions?
So I'm going to speak first from like a total company perspective, and then I will speak more specifically to an omni-channel DTC, lens. From a macro perspective, and particularly having worked for private equity, we're looking at sales, we're looking at EBITDA, we're looking at our debt level. We're looking at how much are we growing. So that's more from a financial perspective. If I put it more into some of the business, metrics, what is how big is the customer file? We're looking at retention, like you said, ROAS. We're looking at the LTV of customers. NCAP is very important, and RCAC. And how does that all fit into the budget and the desired EBITDA growth that my ownership team have typically been looking for. So it all comes together. But do you have any questions on that? Or
no, it's good. Maybe just clarify our CAC and NCAC.
Yeah. So NCAC is what is to get to add a new customer to the file. What is the customer acquisition cost? And I have worked very closely with someone who had been the chief customer officer in agreeing on what are we going to include in that total that customer acquisition cost. RCAC is for returning customers. And yes. And we also, I think, when you look at technology, it is very important to have a robust, customer, database, so that like a CRM tool, so that you that you're integrating the customers with the cost that it takes to acquire those customers and keep in the file.
Makes sense. As we look to start to wrap up, I'm curious, obviously you're well known in the space. When you look at these direct to consumer omni-channel businesses, do you have a certain playbook or frameworks that you like to bring in? I know every business is different, but do you like to typically is there a few things that you always kind of look as a quick way to drive results?
So first, every business have strengths, they have challenges, right? But every business, that is successful or at one time was successful, they have that reason for being. They have a solution that is catering to a consumer need. So first I have to get my arms around that. What is that proposition? And then what are the key levers that can be pulled so that ultimately the business can optimize its performance. So whether it's, their vendor community and they can leverage the vendor base, whether it's the strength of the brand, whether it's the price value equation of the products. So once I understand that, then I typically will, reach across the business with my cross-functional brethren, and we'll say, hey, I'll usually give them some opportunities, but give me ideas of ways that we think that we can take cost out of the system and while also either keeping the same or an enhanced consumer experience. You don't want to do anything and take something away that the consumer really values. So that has been sort of the playbook that I have entertained for over 20 years. And I've been very fortunate looking back on the relationships that I have cultivated over the years. Cannot do this by myself. I've worked with some really smart and talented people. And, I've just been very fortunate that way. People make the world go round. And so working with great people and then putting this process in place to come up with solutions, again, that either enhance or are imperceptible to the consumer, but ways that we can be more efficient, use the dollars of the company better, and then hopefully unleash savings that could either be reinvested, behind the brand, or it can go back to, go back to the ownership, whatever, whatever it may be. But that's typically my job.
Cool. Love it, Robin. This has been awesome. Like I mentioned, first ever CFO / COO episode. So really appreciate your time, Robin. And thank you again.
Thanks for having me.
The e-commerce toolbox Expert Perspectives is brought to you by Noibu. To find out more about Noibu and how we can help you debug your e-commerce site and rocket your revenue, visit www.noibu.com. That's Noibu.com. And then make sure to search for the e-commerce toolbox Expert Perspectives on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found, and click subscribe so you don't miss out on any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at Noibu, thanks for listening.